Some of them are more focused on the present situation, the political situation. Most of the groups, of course, are doing a mixture towards both a religious and a political study tour. And many of them meet Gerard Horton from Military Court Watch, and you give a very interesting perspective to the present situation there. But first of all, I would like to congratulate you for the win yesterday night against Colombia.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah.
So we'll be in at least for another week.
Yeah, and we will meet on the pitch on Saturday. Yes. Yeah, Sweden and England, so that's...
Thankfully I won't be here.
So, I think we start with you, Lena. Save the Children, you have worked very hard for a long time through the Swedish political system to have the Convention on the Right of the Child as a law in Sweden. And why is that important? Why have you worked so hard for this?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that since 1989, now the convention will actually turn 30 years next year. And I'd like to just start by saying why is it important to have a convention before entering into the discussion about the Swedish law. Internationally, we have seen since 1989 big achievements in terms of children's rights because of the convention. And it was important because children were then placed first above all political interests. And I was back then working as a volunteer for a child rights organization in Guatemala. And it was a really big thing that actually we had a UN convention that would protect children. So it's kind of a common benchmark, which is very important. And as you, and can I speak a little bit about generally before we enter into why it's important in Sweden? So the convention overall, it has made many kind of structural. It has led to many structural adjustments. For instance, before the convention, only 3 countries in the world had actually laws that would ban corporal punishment against children. And now we have 53 countries actually banning corporal punishment. We have also seen that many countries have actually taken, and it was also a kind of a call for the international community and for the governments to spare no efforts in building also up system in the countries to protect children. So we have seen now that there are in many countries ministries like for children and families, and we also see protection system for children, and that is also something that has actually happened since the convention was ratified. But most importantly, and that is also according to the global system, many countries, all the countries that have ratified, 194 countries, we must all report to the committee of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And that committee is then analyzing all these reports and then providing feedback with recommendations to the countries, which is very important because then we, as civil society organization, can actually work together with the government. We can advocate and we can support so that the recommendations can be implemented in each country. And we as Save the Children see that as a very important task to actually use these reports. That is also something that is an important tool for us as a civil society organization. But on the Swedish law, why is that important? Is a kind of convention. It has been very important to actually put emphasis on the rights. But bringing it into Sweden as a law and putting it into the legislation system is just another uplift. Because if professionals in Sweden, they don't really care about international, it's a UN convention. They care about what is actually the legislation in Sweden. So now we need to work hard, together of course with authorities and others that work together with children, to raise awareness and have knowledge about that legislation. so that they can be instrumental in protecting children, such as when they work in schools, teachers, social workers, health workers, etc. So this is something we need to kind of increase knowledge about this legislation. But then also a law can make individuals can use it to actually bring cases to the court and then have decisions based on the articles in the conventions, have like ruling from the courts based on the conventions. So we hope that overall this will be a very important step also to both have more awareness and then to, in concrete terms, get to know what the convention will mean in Sweden, so that children will be more, first of all, empowered, but also to get better education, better health services, and also foremost being listened to. Because children should also have the right to be listened to. So that was a long answer to your first short question.
Thank you. And there has been some criticism against these political procedures. Some have been saying that this is a political theater or something. I mean, the children in Sweden, they are in good care, and the laws in Sweden take in consideration the situation for the children. But what is your, from say the children, what is your standpoint on that?
Well, we have been working hard to get this law to come through in Sweden. So certainly we think it's really important. And as I said, it's really bringing in the convention to be more concrete in our own country, so that we will have a convention translated into legislation is super important, not only Sweden, in all countries that have actually ratified the convention. So, and as I said, in terms of professionals and lawyers, professionals working with children, as I said, teachers, social workers, health workers, etc., they will be more knowledgeable. They need to know about the law, because if you work in a certain area in Sweden, you need really to know about the law. And also that there will now be also that we can bring court cases when we and all individuals actually see that children's rights are not actually responded to, or they are neglected. So we have a kind of a legal support now to do that, and that is so important.
Gerard, I forgot to say that you are a lawyer, and you have been working with human rights issues for many years. What importance has the Convention on the Rights of the Child in human rights work, if you see it on a general international level? I mean, you are working on the ground, on the field, so you have your experience from there, but if you also see it on a political level.
Yeah, I mean, as was said, it does provide a very important benchmark, which I think is essential. As far as Israel is concerned, Israel has ratified the convention in 1991. And when it comes to Israeli children, Israel follows the convention pretty closely. They provide the periodic reports to the Committee on the Rights of the Child. And these are very detailed reports that they provide, and many of the rights and protections contained in the Convention on the Rights of the Child are incorporated into Israel's youth law. So it's not a bad system in many respects inside Israel. Now, when it comes to the occupied West Bank, though, Israel takes a different position. It says the occupied West Bank is a conflict zone, and as a conflict zone, the appropriate system of law is the laws of war, not human rights law. And so human rights law, they say, does not apply. Now, that position has essentially been rejected internationally. The international consensus is that even in times of conflict, both the laws of war and human rights law apply simultaneously. And if there's any dispute between the two legal systems, then the laws of war take precedence. But in general terms, both systems can apply together. But because Israel takes that position, when it provides these very detailed reports to the Committee on the Rights of the Child, like generally over 100 pages long. They don't include any information on the conflict, on Palestinian children in the West Bank. What's interesting, though, is Israel's position is somewhat inconsistent, because if you analyze the actual information contained in the reports it submits, the data, the details, you find that Israeli settler children living in the West Bank are in fact included in those reports. So it's not quite accurate to say Israel doesn't apply the convention to the West Bank. It applies the convention to Israeli children in the West Bank, but not to Palestinian children. And therefore you have the problem of discrimination. You know, Article 2 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child says the convention cannot be applied in a discriminatory manner. And you do see that happening in the West Bank. And it's not the only example of legal discrimination. So for example,
excuse me, Gerard, before we going into the examples and before we going deeper into the Israel-Palestine conflict, I would like to ask you, Lena, about Save the Children in Sweden. You have a special task in the Save the Children word to work with civil-military relations. Can you say something about that? Because it sounds strange, maybe that Save the Children, you are working also together with the military organizations.
Yes, and as Gerard said, in many settings it is not understood that the Convention of the Rights of the Child is applied in all settings, also during conflict, also during war, not only in countries of peace. And so Save the Children in Sweden, we have been working since 1993, first in Sweden with military training with the Swedish Armed Forces and also with the Folkebildad Academy. And that was mainly pre-deployment training, and it was very much focused on child rights and child protection. And then with that experience from Sweden, we then moved and started to work 98 in Africa. And more or less the same issues. It's, as I said, during peace periods or in countries with peace, it's natural that the government is the actual duty bearer responsible to uphold the human rights and the child rights principles. But in terms of war and in conflict, that actor is not really present. The military is much more present. And the military doesn't know about this. So we felt that it was a strong need to train militaries and armed forces and also peacekeeping forces to be able to protect children in conflict. And that training has, for instance, led to a shift and engagement from the militaries in terms of recruitment of children in armed conflicts. And also one important issue, because for instance, education is often a right that is neglected to children in conflict. And so safe schools is also a concept that we train militaries in, so that they can be proactive in actually protecting schools from being attacked, and also protecting, helping children and create safe spaces so that they can actually access their schools during conflict. So this is, we want to create a shift in thinking, but also, of course, create more knowledge among the militaries. And now this sounds so simple, and it's not at all easy. This is a very complex work. And sometimes why should militaries, listen to an international NGO, even when in some cases they just neglect the right of the children. So we need to be very context specific and work from different angles. Sometimes with the Ministry of Defense, for instance, because the military would rather listen to the Ministry of Defense than to Save the Children. So kind of address it from different angles and be very context specific, because this is really hard work, but we feel the necessity to do it. And I think that my colleagues are quite good at it now, and really get in touch with armed forces.
Can you mention any of conflicts where you have been involved?
Where we've been working?
Yeah, where you have been working.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, for instance, I think Liberia, Rwanda, a couple of countries
Yeah.
where we have children really severely affected by conflict.
For me, as a person who have not done the military service, I'm not familiar with the military organization or military system and so. But Gerard, you have said that, for instance, the military court in Israel, it's working very openly, and it's easy to get access for you or even for a visitor to go there and watch the procedure. Can you tell us a little bit how the military court is working and your possibility to watch actually?
Yeah, so the military courts were established, Israeli military courts were established in the West Bank on the 7th of June 1967. Their jurisdiction is territorial, so it applies to all of the West Bank. So anyone in the West Bank technically is subject to military law.
Both Palestinians and Israelis?
Yes. Now, under international law, there shouldn't be any Israeli civilians in the West Bank as settlers, but there are. So technically speaking, the military courts have jurisdiction over both Palestinians and Israelis in the West Bank. Now, these military courts, I don't know if we'll have time to talk about them a bit later, but they have a very high conviction rate, 95% for children. A number of organizations are very critical of them.